Okay, I think we're going to make a start. Hello again. If you are just joining us just now for this part of the session, you're welcome. If you are joining from the previous or maybe even from earlier this morning, you are also welcome once again. For those who are just joining us, we have previously been having a session where we have been listening to the lived experiences of two Black autistic Christian adults, where they've shared their experiences, their church and faith experiences with us. And subsequent to that, we are going to go on to have another panel discussion, this time with or between theologians, autistic advocates, and Black church leaders. And this is all in our bid to, like one of the key aims of our project, this research project and this conference, is to promote and amplify the voices of autistic individuals. But apart from that, to also promote dialogue between theologians, between the academy, between practitioners, and between people with lived autistic experiences themselves, in order to tackle and deal with some of the issues that our research has highlighted. So in that spirit, we're going to be having this panel conversation this afternoon. So we have three panelists who are going to help us have some of these discussions. The first is Dr. Harvey Kwiyani. Dr. Harvey Kwiyani is an African theologian, a celebrated African theologian, I must add. He is specially gifted in talking about issues to do with intercultural theology. So Dr. Harvey has actually written a book in that light, Multicultural Kingdom. And very recently, he has also released a powerful book called Decolonizing Mission. So he's a key voice when it comes to issues to do first with African theology, intercultural theology, and also African Christian thought. So Dr. Harvey Kwiyani, you are most welcome to the discussion. And we are so glad you've been able to join us. We are also going to be in conversation with the Reverend Joseph Ola. He is a dynamic African Pentecostal pastor and academic. You don't always get those two together a lot. So Reverend Joseph is a pastor serving in a church in Liverpool. He's also a researcher, currently I think almost completing a PhD research at the University of Roehampton. He's also a lecturer in African theology at Church Mission Society. And apart from that, he's a writer. He's written so many books on diaspora ministry and also issues to do with youth as well. So Reverend Joseph Ola, you are most welcome to the panel. Finally, we are going to be in conversation with a wonderful woman who is Dr. Venessa Swaby. And Venessa comes with a lot of experience, both lived experience of autism and also experience of community advocacy, especially autism community advocacy in Black and African community spaces. He's an advocate, he's a trainer, and like I've said, he has lived experience of autism and experience in work with Black families. So together we're going to be having a conversation reflecting on some of the issues that have been raised this morning, and especially some of the issues we have listened to with our interviewees just previously. But before we get into the panel conversation, we are going to start by watching a video clip. And again, that is in the spirit of amplifying autistic voices, autistic experience, lived experiences, with the bid to educate, to inspire, and also to give voice. So we're going to watch a video clip, and this video clip is from or by or highlights the life and some of the experiences of Yes. So anything that resonates with you or has struck you from any of these accounts we have listened to and engaged with?
Thank you very much. Both from the morning session and especially with the conversation with Lola and Serena, and now with hearing from Reverend Karen Best, it's been very eye-opening for me, to say the least. I think what struck me the most would be around this very huge blind spot that many of our churches, at least speaking from the Pentecostal tradition that I belong to, well, that big blind spot in our ecclesiology around, just doing things and structuring our churches and our ecclesiologies in a way that is targeted at what would be termed as neurotypical people. I think personally, I believe in some sense that all of us are on the spectrum on one way or the other. It's just when we begin to make those distinctions and those classifications that it gets a bit tricky. I think some of what Lola and Serena said, how they've been treated, their experiences is just so disheartening to hear. And I think even for a neurotypical person, that would still have been a very sad experience. And then that is being complicated, as it were, by what should have been a gift, really, in terms of their neurodiversity. So yeah, it's just given me a lot of things to think about. I love the image of the ideal church that both of them painted at the end. And oh, how I long for that to be what our churches would begin to look like. Jesus-centered, accessibility conscious, safeguarding conscious, and all those basic things in training for pastoral ministry and in generally carrying the members along in all of those things. So yeah, it's been a very exciting and enlightening experience for me. Thanks for involving me.
Thank you so much. Harvey, what have been your impressions? What are your impressions on the experiences we have, listened to and engaged with?
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, I echo everything that Reverend Ora has shared. The simple fact that this is a huge blind spot in our ecclesiologists and in our theologists. We tend to, especially if you're coming from an African Pentecostal tradition, we tend to spiritualize everything. So all problems have to be resolved by, a spiritual diagnosis. And that diagnosis will be, there's a demon here, and we need to cast out this, we need to do this, we need to do that. And yet, to be fair, I mean, the scriptures don't paint that kind of image. It's just something that's come from our tradition, our ways of reading the text. But also, on the other hand, there's a challenge with another reading of the text, another way of understanding what God is doing that's shaped. And I mean, there could be other ways of talking about it, but let me just use the word shaped by whiteness. The images of a God that is so married to an idea of what's to be normal, such that anything that doesn't look normal is not really welcomed into that space. And again, that's a very narrow reading of the story of what's happening in the Bible, because, of course, God loves diversity. I mean, there are 7-8 billion of us in the world. None is the same. God loves the difference. And yet, when we shape our understanding of God, our images of God in this clean manner, just makes it difficult for others to belong. And so I really, really appreciate both Serena and Lola, and again, Karen Best, for sharing their stories, for opening our eyes to the fact that actually God is working in more ways than we seem to understand and appreciate in many of our circles. It's been a good conversation for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Venessa, anything to add? I know you come from the dimension of lived experience and also experience in Black communities. So listening to Lola and Serena's story and Reverend Best's story, Did any aspects of those stories resonate with your own experiences or experiences you've heard from Black community spaces?
I think, as I said earlier when I was speaking to Leon, I think the challenges that I suppose I've experienced when people say they want to go to church, I always ask them, what's your reason why you want to go to church? Because the church is not a place just to take it, you've got to take it quite seriously. So I know with me, I grew up in church from a very young age. My grandmother was my influence person. But when I was listening to the two young ladies, I could resonate with a lot of what they were saying. But then again, if anybody says, I'm a Christian, I have to always be really careful. If you are not in the church no more, it's sort of like, if you've had those bad experiences, it's like going back to basics. So for me, listening to the Reverend Early, the Archdeacon, I got late diagnosed in my 50s, and looking back over the years and listening to the young ladies that were speaking, because I didn't get a chance to listen to the rest of the other presentations, it's that not being belonging, not being believed, not being heard. And then when you do get the diagnosis, when I'm talking about diagnosis, you get the official diagnosis, it's like when you do get it, people say that, you don't look autistic. But the challenge is, I think, what we've got to look at when we listen to the two young women that were speaking was being left unheard and their needs not being met. Again, I could talk about my experience with me being in church with all my children with the tambourines, because obviously I go to Pentecostal Apostolic, and it's that thing of people don't really hear the voices of those in the Pentecostal Apostolic churches, and it's a different way of life, a different way of living, and not everybody opens up, because it's that thing of, if you talk about prayer and deliverance, and most of the time we always hear about praying out the behavior, when for me is, if us as young, a family have got an autistic child, this is me in the early days, if we can't even accept what autism is within our own communities, how can you go into the church community and the Black churches if they don't accept what autism is? And that's for any disability. I think that's where my take is if you don't understand and you don't accept, because I do know some leaders who have got children who are neurodivergent, autistic, ADHD, and they won't come out into the public. And I think if they don't come out into the public, how can you support your congregation? And I think that's my take on it.
Thank you so much. And I want us to stick with the subject of community. And again, back at you, Venessa. So from your experiences, and I know you've already shared a lot just now, but I'm sure it can't all be bad. So from your experiences interacting with in Black community spaces and church spaces, are there any aspects of community life?
We got to keep it real, because at the end of the day, you can't pretty up autism. You can't pretty up that if your young person can't go in a space and it's noisy, because I've got to talk about autism. I can't talk about the other conditions. I'm talking about autism. So, I'm in a church, the church I attend, it works because my pastor's wife works in an autistic school. So she was able to understand me. So if I was rocking, not so much me before I got diagnosed, but when my son was acting a certain way, she was able to embrace. And again, remember when you use that word community, we can be in a community, but you're not part of the community if you don't understand, again, what the person is coming to. So if a church sees a child running up and down in a church and they say, we're here for everybody, we love everybody. And then that church, I've heard parents turn and say, can you remove your child from the church because they're disrupting the church? So I think a church who embraces, like the church that I attend to, that made me understand it was the love that kept me in that church. And it wasn't by words, it was by action. So I think a community is somebody that if they know that a family is looking for a church to go to, or you got the two young ladies who have been treated, I feel the pain because I was there. It's if you know that you can say I'm autistic without the person saying you don't look autistic, they shouldn't come out their mouth. It should say, okay, we welcome you. How can we help you? So they gave you all the pointers. So my thing about community is welcoming, and you're meaning it in words and action, not just by saying that we're a church for all. Because the word inclusive, and we've got to keep it real, because I'm very literal, and that's why I've got to be really careful what I'm saying, is when you say you're inclusive, like the other young lady, I think it was Sabine, I think it was, is that if she's got visual impairment, you can't always be inclusive in some areas because if light's low, she needs that light. So it's about making those adaptations to make sure the community, for those who can't always be in certain spaces, are still welcomed, to make those little adjustments. Sorry.
Yeah. No, thank you so much. Yeah. Any thoughts on that? So what aspect, I know I can probably maybe safely say for Harvey and Joseph that you all have some experience in Black or African community spaces. Can you comment on any aspects of Black or African communal lives that are supportive of autism or can be supportive of autistic people?
Yeah, there's a sense in which I come from Malawi, so I speak from the experience of growing up in Malawi. There's a sense in which my community in Malawi understands that it can only be a community if it's inclusive of everyone. And that allows us, and it comes from our understanding of personhood, which of course translates Ubuntu. That's a word that means I am because I belong. I am because I have a community around me. And therefore, in that understanding of life, belonging to a community is critical. But that community has to be a community for everybody, because you need the community in order to be you. The individual needs the community, but also the community needs the individual. The individual has to contribute to the community to make the community work. And in such settings, it allows us to actually get to a point of believing that the community needs everybody in the community. Old, young, male, female, able or differently abled, everybody is needed for the community to function. Right. Now, with that in mind, I have to tell a story of, again, Malawi political climate of the 80s, 90s when I grew up. Our president would say, I'm coming to a city, right? And the leaders in the city would then go on a rampage, cleaning up the city. And by cleaning up the city, really, they are moving away with people who seem homeless, the people who seem to have mental health issues, so that when the president comes, the city looks clean. There is nothing wrong in this city. And we tend to do that with our churches. In our communities, everybody belongs. When we come to church, we tend to think that God wants to see only the clean, only the good-looking, only the able, only the ones who fit a certain mold in order for God to be happy, in order for God to come and visit us. And so, if we are going to belong in an inclusive community, it has to be everybody. And God doesn't mind coming in and seeing the people among us who are struggling with all these issues. That's why He is our God, that He comes in to help us carry that load. He doesn't expect us to just become perfect because God is showing up. He wants us to be who we are in our diversity, with all our challenges, with all our greatness. He wants to come and be with us no matter what our situations are. That, for me, is a good inclusive community that can actually become a good inclusive church.
Thank you so much. So genuine community is synonymous with inclusion. Community means everybody, irrespective of anything. Yeah. Thank you so much. Joseph, any impressions on that?
Similar lines of thoughts with what Dr. Albert has shared. Because I think community is a double-edged sword. While it's the strength that we have in many African settings, it's also sometimes the very weakness that we have. And when a community tends to come around certain ideals, things that we believe should be the norm. And when those norms are so rigid that they don't make room for the diversity that comes or that the community naturally attracts, then it becomes exclusive at the end of the day on the long run. So that's where I see many of our church communities, for example, within the Black majority churches, we have the template to work with if we will indeed work with it in the best possible way, that both the scriptures and even the very details of our culture. Dr. Abi was talking of Ubuntu. In my own context from southwestern Nigeria, the Yoruba culture, we also have something of that understanding when we speak of an ideal child. An ideal child will be an omoluabi. Omoluabi literally means, if you translate that, would be the kind of child that is born by the best of character. So in that sense, the best of character and the attributes of what Omoluabi would have, one of the very core attributes is respect and compassion and empathy. And so that person already should be the kind of person that is open to anyone and everyone, because he knows enough to understand that every single individual has something to offer, and you have to respect them on that basis and know that you can do life with them in that sense. So the very same thing that pushes others out, this sense of, you are not like part of our ideal. Actually, if you yourself are part of the ideal, then part of the ideal is to be inclusive. Part of the ideal is to be embracing of, anyone and everyone in that sense. So yeah, that's where I see that we have something to offer to support autistic people, but also perhaps the same thing that pushes away a good number of people. Yeah.
Yes. Now I'm just here really, really enjoying all of these deep philosophies, foundational philosophy that come from, Black and African communal life. And my question, or what's boggling my mind, is if all of these foundational ideas exist in Black and African cultures, communal cultures, how do we translate these into our theologies? Because currently, with what we are seeing and the things, there is some of the things coming out of this research, it's showing that, our churches, some of our churches are very exclusive. Yet, we're talking about all of these foundational ideas and philosophies that are already part of our culture. So how do we translate these, or why are these not coming out in how we do theology and how we think about God? And I'm looking at Joseph and Harvey to comment.
Okay.
First of all,
yes, there's a whole lot that goes into the life of, I can speak at least as someone that belongs to what would be termed the migrant church, a diaspora congregation that is made up and almost entirely of immigrants in that sense. And there is a lot of nuances to, the everyday life of the church on the one hand. And then there is also the aspect of some Pentecostal beliefs that when it comes across the translations from our culture, which is already so spirit-centered, so reading spirituality into everything and every issue, can begin to complicate things and actually start acting as hindrances to us embodying this best version, if you will, of communal life. And part of that I would just touch on, for example, would be around the theology of healing within the Pentecostal circle. And there's a broad range of what that would look like, from tradition to tradition, from denomination to denomination, congregation to congregation. But when there is this understanding that, when you're, as a parent, beginning to notice things that, and you see them as observations of differences from what you expect to be the norm in your child, you don't even want to acknowledge that. You want to live in denial of that, and you want to just make that a prayer point for everything to be reset back to normal or factory setting. Because if you bring that up as a prayer point in church, now everybody starts to look at you as the parent of the child that is not normal, for example. So it goes on and on like that. And what's feeding that understanding, what's feeding that interpretation is what comes from the pulpit every Sunday. Be it this understanding that, God just wants us all to be this perfect people, whatever that image of perfection looks like. But when we have the understanding that even in the broad scheme of things, in God's providence, there will be times when the deepest desires of our hearts, no matter how much we passionately desire it, will not come to pass because He's got this bigger purpose and bigger plan. I think it gives us a better way to begin to embrace the diversity that God has, by His providence, introduced into our communities, so that we begin to see things a little bit differently. But when every issue is an issue to pray into and pray until it's, we have a program in my church called Pray Until Something Happens. In other words, you just keep praying and praying on the same thing until something happens. If that's the full scope of theology we have about prayer, about healing, about life generally, I think it's still not balanced. But to also incorporate that other side where Paul went to God 3 times about the thorn in his flesh, and God said to him, my grace is sufficient for you. I'm not taking away this thorn, whatever you want to ask. And of course, that led to a different way of seeing that thorn. And then he begins to say, actually, I'm going to boast about my weaknesses. I'm going to rejoice in them, knowing that when I am weak, actually, that's when God's strength finds its most expression through my life. So I think it's deeply a theological issue. And perhaps a training issue, but then when that comes across again and again from the pulpit, it begins to shape the way people think and begin to reinforce all these ideas around stigma and things like that around autism and autistic peoples.
Yeah. And I think you're already speaking into, again, this recurring theme coming from our research about awareness. So like you're saying, what's coming from the pulpit, whoever is preaching or spreading the message, their own perception and ideas and understanding and knowledge about these issues are going to shape what they pass on and what is received by congregations as well. So the importance of awareness and knowledge, and both socially, generally, and theologically, for church leadership is very important. Yes, yeah. Harvey, you look like you want to say something.
Not really. I think Joseph has said quite a lot, and some really helpful stuff have come out already. I think one of the challenges that we need to wrestle with as a body of Christ is the simple fact that actually God has given theological resources to the whole body. So whether it's Africans in the continent, Africans in the diaspora, Africans in the Caribbean islands, and or Latin Americans and Asians, God has given all of us gifts for one another, theological gifts that actually help us see God better when we put them in a conversation, right? Such that the African, the Asian, the Latin American, the European Christian or theologians talking to one another allows us to see God better, allows us to know God better. The Africans will bring something that the Europeans didn't think of, right? And the same with the Asians will bring something that the Africans didn't think of. And together, when we put our theological minds together, there's a saying that we talk a lot about in African theological thought, that you see God better through the eyes of another, right? And so just the possibility that we can actually see God through the eyes of a different other, somebody telling us something about God that we didn't know. And it's probably connected with training, with education around these issues, but just being open to learn from a different other to help us understand things that we couldn't understand on our own. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes. Yeah, Venessa, I see you've posted in the chat, and I like what you said, that communal strength when aligned with God's word, can be a powerful support for autistic people and their families. And just again, final question to do with this community issue, and that's looking for your perspective, Venessa. What can churches learn in order to better support autistic people by listening to the experiences of Black autistic individuals like we've done and their families and communities? So what can churches learn? What would they gain if they listened to communities from your experiences? What are the learning points that can come from there that support autistic Christian faith?
I think it always starts with leadership. I think it's the person that's at the top, because us at ground-based, where we're doing all the work in the congregation, you may see people say, my child is autistic. And if the leadership are not bringing it to the forefront, so like, for instance, I know on social media there was a church where the pastor, someone I think was running up and down in the back, and everybody was quite okay about it. They didn't sort of tell the child to sit down. It's making those adaptations. It is about the listening. It's about it's not just about turning down the lights or turning down the music. It's about is your resources, is your website bringing, has it got is it autism friendly? Is it neurodivergent? Do they bring in training? Sunday school as well. Are the teachers trained? Again, I've always said that if there's a lot of church members that are attending specialist schools, are they sitting in the congregation quiet? Why don't they bring those that ministry into the church? Because they are sitting there, So I think it's about, I know people want money, but at the end of the day with me, it's, common sense is free. And, it's just giving something back. And that's something I've always done. And if somebody says, I'm struggling with my pastor, I would say, well, do you have a Sunday school? Do you have a teacher? Who's the go-to person? But if they say that they won't listen to me, then we could do all the training. As I said, I've done for years, lots of workshops, but it doesn't mean that the churches are listening. So I think it's the people right at the top. It's if they hear a leader speaking at the pulpit, more chance they're going to listen. I don't think they're going to listen to us. And I'm saying that from my heart. My pastor's different because he listens, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing now. But he pushed me because he saw what was happening to my son. But not every pastor is going to have that maybe too scared to rock the boat. I don't know. But it's about listening and your publications. And when you're doing your Sunday service, do you have a quiet time? Again, if it's not about turn the music off, it's just you can still praise and worship, in a different way for some autistic people, because not every autistic person. Some do love noise. We've got to remember that not every autistic person wants a noise down. Some sensory seek for loud noise. So we have to be so careful. Not every autistic person comes under that umbrella. And I think that's what people misinterpret, that you've got to turn the music down. And that's where a lot of people can be very resentful, I think, in the church, especially in the Pentecostal church, in the noise, the tambourines. You can't turn around and say, turn down the music. And if they say we're going to do praise and worship, we're going to sing for 2 songs and it's still going on for an hour. If it's spirit-led, it's spirit-led. So sorry, you just have to make sure the information is there. A little leaflet to say we don't go on time. We don't stick to time. You've got to be very visual, because if you're not visual, I will get agitated and start rocking. And that's me. So it's about understanding the family and not write them off just because that other autistic child is different to another autistic child that comes into your congregation, or adult. Be mindful.
Yeah. So certain listening is very important.
Listen,
as you say,
yeah.
Autistic experiences are
very
different. So you need to listen and know before you act. Thank you so much for that perspective. Just for the audience, we're going to have a little time for some questions. If you have a question, you can post it in the Q&A, and we can share that with the panel and discuss as well. So there is opportunity to ask questions from the floor. If you have a question, please post it into the Q&A or if that's not possible, the chat, and we will raise that question. And now I want to turn back to Harvey, especially about the decolonizing agenda. Like I said in the beginning, you have just launched a book, still in the process of launching, called Decolonizing Mission. But in the beginning, when we started talking, you did allude a little bit to those aspects of theology. So when it comes to awareness and training, one of the things I said in my presentation this morning was that, yes, it was almost generally given and understood from all sides that awareness and training is needed, especially for African church leaders, African Christians, and in fact, church leaders and Christians in general, when it comes to neurodiversity. But I did add that when it comes to Black and African communities, these trainings, theological or practical, have to be culturally sensitive. So what does that look like? What might a culturally sensitive, practical, and theological training for African and Black majority church leaders look like, especially in relation to autism and neurodiversity?
Yes, thank you. I think on the one hand, we need to sort of realize that a great deal of our theological education is informed by Western thought. It's still Western theology that we are teaching around the world. And that makes it difficult for local contextual theological issues to seep into our theological conversations. So even though a Malawian will understand that we are only as strong as we are a community together, that for us to really be, we need to belong to a community, that doesn't come up into their theology generally, up until they maybe are consciously aware that they need to do this. But their theology still individuates them. So you tend to think and behave as if you are a Westerner. And in the same way, when we then begin to wrestle with issues to do with say autism or any forms of bodily issues that we may have, there will be a way of thinking about this in communities around the world that are actually different from the way Western theology articulates those problems and deals with them. Some of them will be communal. I'll give you an example. This is an interesting example. I was meeting with a friend of mine in Germany. He's South African. We met in Germany, neurodivergent, and so struggles with depression and a few other things that just makes life difficult for him. He leads a mission agency in Germany. And he says, I'm really struggling here because I don't have access to the mental health support that I'm used to, that really helps me reset my thinking so I can be well again. And I said, what do you mean by that? You are in Germany, there are really good mental health doctors here. What? And he said, no, actually what I really need is just a place where I can go and hang out with my people, laugh and joke and talk for 3 hours. And when I'm done with that, the fact that I belong to this community, that I can hang out with, that we can laugh together, resets my mental health. When I leave that community, I'm normal, I'm back, I'm healthy, right? So the need for the community, for the need for a community that helps you deal with some of these things, and that's where possibly African theology and other theologies could help, to realize actually we need community. We can't really do this on our own. We need community. And to take you back to the question of decolonizing, the process of decolonizing will involve us realizing these are the things that work for us, right? And these things that work for us are God-given theological tools that we can use to strengthen our communities. We can use to invigorate our communities. We don't have to do things just because the European has said so. We do things because these things have worked in our communities for ages, for centuries. And therefore, yes, of course, Western theology may say those are not, they don't really meet our scientific world, but they have worked for our communities for decades. Why are they a problem now? So we decolonize our theology by saying, actually, there is something here that God has given our people. They may not be the white Western scholars that we read in the libraries, but God has given things to our ancestors, to our grandparents, that actually help us negotiate life in this world here and now. That could be one of the steps forward.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. And then coming to you, Joseph, for practical experience. So yes, as a church leader, we're talking about awareness and training. How would you want that to look like for your church community? So yeah, what, like same as I've asked, what would they culturally African if training?
I'm not sure if it's just me. Your voice was cutting out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is it clearer?
Yeah, it's clearer. But I think I got the question. And yes, I think it's addressing it on all the various levels, practically speaking. Beginning with just giving that awareness. Let's go back to the training that makes pastors or church leaders. Very many Pentecostal church leaders don't necessarily have a robust theological training, let alone such kind of theological training that then begins to also incorporate aspects of things like neurodivergence and all that. That's a much needed thing for us in this day and age, and more so in the context in which we are doing ministry from. And when that comes into the picture, I believe it's going to address the majority of the issues around denial, around fear, from families seeing a diagnosis as something shameful or something, or some sort of spiritual failure, in that sense. And I also think people we give responsibilities to. Again, part of the elements of Pentecostalism is this idea of priesthood of all believers. So we believe everyone, in some sense, should be a minister, should be involved in the life of the church. And so you could have literally almost anyone call upon anyone to come and lead the prayers and things like that. But anyone who stands before the congregation to say things or to do one thing or the other, even if it is for 5 minutes, holds a lot of authority and has been given a platform. And the kind of things they say in that time can be positive or negative and can have influences and impact beyond the 5 minutes that they give. So I was at a vigil recently, for instance, where someone made a comment about ADHD that was probably so flippant that, someone that actually is suffering with that will feel really embarrassed, really hurt, and things like that. So that's that kind of training that cuts across every level of the church, even to the point of the discipleship framework that we use, that begins to understand the image of God, the imago Dei, in the way that recognizes everyone as indeed an expression of the image of God in all of our diversity, in all of our uniqueness, and as a gift to come together. I think it's Dr. Harvey that made me appreciate this scripture in Ephesians 4 that talks of, the joints being fitly joined together, that which every joint supplies in the body of Christ, and appreciating that beauty. So yeah, every one of us have got something in that sense, but it goes back to that training, the kind of training that makes pastors, the kind of training that goes into our everyday life of discipleship, appreciating people from that very fundamental level of the image of God that we all are, and then embracing the diversity that comes across in all that we do and say. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yes. And coming to you, Venessa, so from the perspective of community life to beyond church, what would a culturally sensitive training and awareness look like at community level? Yeah, like Dr. Harvey was saying, what things will work for us, for Black and African communities? What kind of?
Okay, so on one of my presentations, I said that if we're talking about the African dialect is 2,300 languages, just under. And I'm always saying to everybody, I need to know everybody that is in my circle, that if somebody came to me, because I don't like the word BAME, Black, Asian, minority, ethnic community, because I feel what happens is when you bunch everybody together, you miss the dialect and the language. So what I try to do is making sure that if somebody's in the Nigerian church who comes to me, I will know to signposts. And that's what I'm trying to get a lot of my other family and friends is that, I'll just use an example. We got somebody that I know that is, say she's Congolese, and they went and got somebody who's Nigerian to try and help her with an autistic child. And I tried to say, just because you see the word African, you have to be really careful. And it's about it's about trust, because if you end up, so I'm really getting brain fog at the moment. I'm really tired. So I think that the challenges I think is happening is that people use the word Black and African, but they've got to realize that it's so broad, and we have to make sure that those churches that we're going to, we're bringing the right trainers in to support those people. So with regards we talk about community, I can help everybody, anybody knows me. But then if somebody comes and I can't support them, I have to know who I can go to. I'm not just going to say, come into my space, because I feel I'm doing more damage. And that's why I feel it's, having this space is really important, because you should have had at least 1,000 people on here. And it just shows that our church are not out in the community, not coming, because I know I've been in other spaces and the conversations that they're having is not what you're doing. It's very rich. And so I feel that from today, I'm hoping in a year's time, we look back that there's lessons learned, that we're not just doing it now and then putting it on the shelf. We're continue pushing and making sure that Harvey and Joshua, Joseph, knows that this is not just today, hoping that we all can come together now. And I can get leaders to say, right, we've got Harvey and we've got Joseph and we've got you, Sheila, and it still needs to go on. Because with theology, it's not my speciality, but I know that there's a lot of churches and a lot of church members, people have left church because they said they didn't feel welcome. But if we hear the voices of what we've heard today, I think this is a new direction to show, look, I've got people now that can speak, because a leader ain't going to listen to me more. A bishop ain't going to listen to me. They'll listen to somebody who's got the title. And I'm being really honest.
Thank you so much for those perspectives. Yeah, so we are nearly out of time. I haven't seen any new questions in the Q&A or in the chat, but there are certainly a lot of conversation going on in the chat and session. So finally, as a last word, and perhaps each of you can comment on this very briefly, can you share one practical or theological step going forward that could make a difference? So after all of this, can you share one thing, either a theological step or practical step, that can make a difference going forward with this conversation? Yeah.
Not to give up what you're doing. It to me is a very big question. I just think everything that you're doing, and when I remember when you first started, and thanking Leon and Dr. Vivi, for all of this is a conversation that I've been trying to do for the last 20 years. And I just feel that it's really good that you're doing it. And I think it shouldn't stop here. It's a space that needs to be opened, because I do know places that would benefit from hearing this, and not just in this space. I think it's important for leaders to hear this.
Thank you so much.
If I could chip in a thought as well, personally, my takeaway from this conversation and this day, from the morning session till now, is to begin to look for people like Venessa, autistic advocates that we can actually bring into the church to begin to have at least that kind of informal conversation and training that begins to make this more central. Because I think even beginning with the ushers and the people working with the children, there is just that need to have this this basic understanding and training that would make everyday ministry more inclusive in that sense, rather than just thinking some particular kids are ever so naughty and some are the model kids that every other person should try to aim to be like. So yeah, just training and working together with autistic advocates would be a very practical way forward in that sense. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Harvey?
You just made me realize that in our theological education, we have a big blind spot. And again, I'm using a word that just of us used earlier, that we can't really say we are training pastors for today, for this world, without talking about these issues. So, of course, a takeaway from me is to rethink everything I'm teaching, to begin to reflect this fact that we live in a world where these issues are prevalent and they shape our congregations and our ministries in a big way. So yeah, really appreciate that you've raised awareness to this. You've brought my attention to this important subject. I will do something about it, definitely.
Amen to that. Yes.
Thank you.
I've just seen a flurry of a few questions in the chat, but one that came earlier on, and actually it's about a statement that was made. So the statement about we are all a little bit autistic, and yeah. So Venessa, I think this you can comment on this. Someone is saying,
oh dear. You know, when they say everybody's got a little bit of something, when it comes to autism, it's not as straightforward. And the reason why I say that, I can be in a space like now, it's quiet in here, but if somebody comes in here, I want to get up and walk out. And it's not as easy to say. I can't. My journey is very different. I can sit in a space and I'm happy, but somebody says something wrong to me. Like now, I've been trying to process. My brain's all over the place at the moment, but I'm just trying to keep on topic when I'm doing this. So it's not as straightforward. Not everyone's got a little bit of autism, and my daughter in particular, which I've not really talked about that side, she will get very offended because she's like, "Mom, no," because I can't sit in the class for long. And the challenges are, if an autistic person has struggled through their whole life from a child right up to adulthood, mental health, broken relationships, they can't be in spaces because of many other things. I'm very cautious what to say, but if somebody can just go in everyday life and they're happy and they can adapt to things, it's not the same. It takes a lot of time for me to adapt. Like I said to Sheila, I needed questions, but in my head, what I wanted to say has not come out to what I wanted to say today because I've had a very tough day. And I think if I was with you guys all day today, I was able to come out with something totally different because I was taking in all the information and processing in. So it's not as straightforward as everyone's got a bit of autism. Sorry.
Thank you so much for the clarification. We are all learning. So thank you for the person who asked the question and for you for yes, clarifying. And I know, yes, our time is up. But I wonder if maybe in a minute, because I don't want this person has told me they've posted a question. So somebody is saying they operate in we're Ghanaian Pentecostal, but predominantly African Pentecostal spaces, and they have come across some of these views about autism and disability that are a bit negative, and they are asking if you have any advice. So this would probably be for Joseph on how they can begin to open dialogue in that community about the image of God and spiritual authorities, how to have a positive conversation, to start a positive conversation around that changes some of these wrong ideas and theologies.
Yeah, as someone that works a lot with young people, I tend to just think of addressing some issues, at least the ones that we don't feel like we have control over the generation above us. Let's begin to think of those coming behind us. So can we begin to have these very accessible, easy to understand conversations beginning with the younger generation? And that includes beginning with those in the kids' church or children church or whatever kind of structure we have in our churches, whether that means that they are meeting together in a separate place or they are together with us in the space. And then I know within the Pentecostal tradition especially, there is a lot of power that comes from whatever comes from the pulpit. And that's why we definitely need some way of, in my church, we have what we call ministers improvement seminars every year. And these are the kind of things that should be discussed in ministers improvement seminars, so that we are constantly being equipped with these things that have been left as huge blind spots, possibly because of the Western theological education that we went for, so that we can have hands-on tools for, things we are dealing with every day, or that we don't even recognize that we are dealing with, but they're just there unaddressed in our churches. I hope that helps.
Thank you so much, Harvey, Joseph, and Venessa. We are incredibly grateful to you for to share your expertise, your knowledge, your wisdom and with us on this topic this afternoon. So this is not the end of the day. We have another session coming up. We have two incredible short papers about to be delivered from 4:15, 4:15. So we're going to take a break for 25 minutes and then come back at 4:15 for our final session, which is to listen to two short paper sessions connected to the theme for today. So thank you once again so much, Harvey. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Venessa, for coming to be with us and to share with us this afternoon. Thank you.
All right.